Two UNIFIL peacekeepers have been killed in southern Lebanon after an explosion destroyed their vehicle. Two others were injured, one of them seriously. It's the second fatal incident in the past 24 hours after an Indonesian peacekeeper was killed when a bomb exploded at one of the UNIFIL positions. Meanwhile, as the Middle East conflict continues, Iran has described US proposals to end the war as unrealistic, illogical and excessive, despite claims from President Donald Trump that a deal could be reached soon. The US president has also threatened further escalation, raising the possibility of American forces seizing or obliterating Iran's main oil terminal, Kharg Island, in the Persian Gulf. Earlier this month, the US said it had carried out attacks on military targets on the island.
Considered a lifeline for Iran's economic security, Kharg Island is the country's main oil terminal in the Gulf, with around 90% of crude exports leaving the country via the small island. Now, Donald Trump has suggested he could seize the facility or indeed bomb it, threatening to obliterate power plants and oil wells if a deal is not reached shortly. It is the latest in a series of seemingly contradictory messages from the US president. On one hand, threatening escalation, while on the other, claiming progress in diplomacy.
We've had very good negotiations today with Iran, getting a lot of the things that they should have given us a long time ago. We'll see how it works out, but they're very good.
Not so, says Iran.
We've had no direct negotiations with America so far. The US demands have been very excessive, unrealistic and illogical.
And today, there has been little sign of de-escalation, with multiple explosions in the capital, Tehran, overnight. While Israel said 2 drones from Yemen had been intercepted just days after the Iran-aligned Houthis entered the war. This oil refinery in northern Israel was also struck, reportedly by Iranian missiles. And images have emerged appearing to show the extent of damage to US aircraft after an attack on a base in Saudi Arabia on Friday. And as an indication of the many growing dangers in this regional war, in the past half hour, confirmation that 2 more Indonesian peacekeepers have been killed in southern Lebanon in what is the second fatal incident in the past 24 hours. In a statement, UNIFIL said, "No one should ever have to die serving the cause of peace." Kate Farley, RTÉ News.
Higher energy prices caused by the Iran war has seen the rate of inflation jump significantly this month, according to an estimate published by the Central Statistics Office. It says inflation in March hit 3.6%, a jump of 1.8% on the previous month. Despite the surge in fuel prices, Taoiseach Simon Harris says there are no plans to introduce COVID-like restrictions to deal with the energy crisis.
After the surge in petrol, diesel and home heating oil, there's no surprise the cost of living has shot up. Despite government measures last week to help with energy costs, fuel prices are still higher than they were before the war in Iran.
Obviously they brought it down since, but it's still a crazy amount.
Every time you go and fill the tank, you're worried that little bit more. Is it going to be cost more? Or?
You drive to work and we're trying to avoid him driving in as much as possible. He'll get the train.
The danger is higher prices could spread particularly to food and hurt the less well off. The chief economist of the European Central Bank said the organisation would act to prevent widespread inflation, but that could see an increase in interest rates.
For the mortgage holders out there, there's a big difference between a temporary increase in interest rates, which doesn't last that long, versus a larger increase. And the large increase really happens when we fail to get inflation under control. Yeah. And then you really have to dig in.
Some other countries are taking steps to curb energy use amid worries about supplies. So could that happen here?
At the moment, we have adequate supplies in our country. We have adequate supplies in Europe. But, got to be honest, and I'm not talking about today, I'm not talking about tomorrow, and I'm not talking about the next couple of weeks, but if this goes on and on and on, And bear in mind, it's a war that is seeing energy supplies destroyed. That does have real consequences in terms of global supplies, and no country is immune from that.
But the opposition says the government needs to do more to cut energy bills.
We're hearing very clearly from hauliers, from farmers, that the danger is if government doesn't get fuel costs under control, that this could pass on to food.
Today oil remains close to record levels, which keeps upward pressure on prices.
Well, let's get more on this now from David, who's here in studio. David, if prices continue to rise, are we looking at the likelihood of interest rates being increased to try to tackle this?
Yeah, I think they are. So at the moment, the rate is 2% in the Eurozone, including Ireland. So the likelihood is that the European Central Bank, if they see this continued momentum in terms of prices, would have to move, potentially with the first interest rate increase coming in April. And that could see 3 interest rate increases throughout this year, potentially bringing rates up to 2.75%. So on the one hand, consumers are looking at higher interest rates, potentially higher prices for food, and all of that creates a momentum where people begin to look for higher wages. Now, the public sector wage agreement expires in June. There are going to be negotiations about that, and already we can see trade unions are saying workers need more because their costs are going up so much. You've got higher fuel, food and interest rates. So that's another thing that the government are going to have to deal with, because those negotiations in terms of wages are very important, because they do set a benchmark for the wider economy too, and other employers. What are they going to do about wages?
All right, Economics and Public Affairs Editor David Murphy, thank you.
Well, in Brussels, EU agriculture ministers are being briefed by the European Commission on possible measures to reduce the cost of fertiliser, which has risen on the back of the Middle East conflict. It's understood Irish stocks of fertiliser are full until mid-April, but will come under pressure soon after that.
Europe is increasingly feeling the economic pain of Donald Trump's war against Iran, even if it has very limited leverage on drawing it to a close. Dozens of trucks and buses drove slowly around the Paris ring road in protest at rising fuel costs.
I have a small business. We're spending 16,000 euros for fuel per month, and now it's gone up to 30,000 euros.
1/5 of the world's oil and gas supplies depend on transit through the Strait of Hormuz, a waterway which Iran has effectively shut. Although most of Europe gets its energy elsewhere, soaring prices worldwide are hitting the EU's economy with an impact, according to the German Chancellor, not seen since the early part of the decade.
If this war escalates into a major regional conflict, it could place an even greater burden on Germany and Europe, as heavy as what we last experienced during the COVID pandemic or at the start of the war in Ukraine.
In Brussels, agriculture ministers were briefed by the European Commission on any respite for farmers from the soaring costs of fertiliser. Global food production depends on the Gulf for 1/3 of the world's supplies of ammonia and urea for the production of fertiliser. The government is looking for a suspension of the carbon tax on imported fertiliser, otherwise known as CBAM.
In terms of CBAM for us in Ireland, the role of fertiliser is a key role there. We see our farmers paying across Europe having to pay a much increased price for fertiliser, and also security of supply is a very big concern there as well. So what I would very much like to see is that the mechanism is there for us to be able to be flexible with CBAM.
EU energy ministers will hold an emergency conference call tomorrow. The longer the conflict goes on, the brighter the flashing red lights over the European economy will appear.
Well, Tony joins us now from Brussels. And Tony, as we've been hearing, there is growing concern over both the energy and the fertiliser crisis. What are the possible tools available to Europe to respond to these?
Well, Tommy, there's going to be a video call tomorrow involving energy ministers. Now, on the one hand, Europe gets most of its energy from the US, from Norway, and isn't acutely affected in terms of direct supplies from the Gulf. Having said that, the price of gas has gone up by 70% since the war began in Europe. And that's obviously having a knock-on effect on the economy across the board. Now, tomorrow they're going to be focusing on things like jet fuel and diesel, which are both rising alarmingly. So they're looking at ways whereby member state governments can subsidise industries that are heavy users of energy. There would be possibly a relaxation of state aid rules. But of course, thinking back to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the problem there is that you lose the level playing field. If some governments can afford to put more money into the energy sector than others, then the single market starts to get unbalanced. Now, on fertiliser, this is a real concern because the key ingredients for fertiliser, the artificial ingredients, mostly come from the Gulf, and they're stranded in the Strait of Hormuz. And obviously, if that frees up quickly, then prices will come down. But there's no indication that the Strait will be reopened anytime soon. Now, the carbon border tax, which the minister referred to there, did prompt a lot of suppliers to buy reserves of fertiliser before the 1st of January when the carbon tax came in. So the reserves are healthy enough, but because of the growing season being imminent, those reserves could be under pressure in the middle of next month because of the need for growers to access that fertiliser.
Tony Connolly in Brussels, thanks indeed. And you can hear more about the global impact of energy costs on Behind the Story podcast, which is available now on the RTE radio player or wherever you get your podcasts. Well, yesterday the US president told the Financial Times that taking control of Iranian oil would be his favourite thing to do. He also warned that the United States might seize Kharg Island, which handles most of Iran's oil exports. Donald Trump was talking to Edward Luce, US national editor with the Financial Times. Edward spoke to me earlier and began by explaining how his interview with Mr. Trump came about.
I simply called his number. I've done it before and got hold of him and had figured out Sunday afternoons in Mar-a-Lago a pretty good time to reach him as he's wandering around with no apparent schedule. And sure enough, he picked up after the first ring and was happy to talk for the next 15 or so minutes.
And he told you during the course of that interview that he wants to take control of Iranian oil. How does he plan on doing that?
Well, that was vague. I kept pressing him for specifics. And of course, you know, he has assembled the 82nd Airborne. There are Marines going into the region. There's Delta forces. There's Army Rangers. He's got a whole bunch of commando groups that he said could easily seize Kharg Island, which is where 90% of Iran's oil exports are routed. But I'm not sure that confidence, which he did reiterate, is something that the Pentagon is giving him. I would imagine they're presenting this as a very high-risk, boots-on-the-ground operation.
Did you get the sense from Donald Trump that he wants to push ahead with that effort to take control of Kharg Island, or was it too difficult to say?
Well, it all depends on how he thinks the negotiations are going. And he kept saying, we're having very good negotiations with the Iranian leadership. They're very different. There has been regime change. All the top leadership were killed in the opening days of the war. And these guys are very professional, he said. But again, when I pressed him for specifics, for example, is Steve Witkoff talking to his Iranian counterpart, Arakshi, the foreign minister, or is your son-in-law, Jared Kushner, talking? He evaded the question, and it turned out basically that there are no direct talks. There are indirect talks with Pakistan as what he called an emissary. So Pakistan basically passing messages back and forth, and that appears to be the extent of it. And if he thinks that these talks, indirect or otherwise, are not going anywhere, well, then he does have these overwhelming forces in the region, and the temptation, it's clearly on his mind. So we however risky such commando raids or Kharg Island seizing ventures would be, we cannot rule them out because they are continually on his mind, and these talks are not really talks as far as I can tell.
You also asked Tim about the status of Mujtaba Khamenei, the man that Iran says is the supreme leader. Did he have did he give any clarity on the status of Mujtaba Khamenei, whether he's injured or whether he's alive?
He said that he thought he was probably dead, but he might be alive, but in a very bad condition. I said, what evidence do you have of this? And he said, well, let's put it this way. You're in a lot better shape than the sun is. So, I mean, again, that's not really a very specific answer, but he hasn't been seen in public for a long time, for what it's worth.
When you were talking to Donald Trump yesterday, did you get any sense that he was a man under pressure, that he was frustrated, or did he seem at ease when he was speaking to you?
Well, he talks in this sort of pretty unfiltered way. I mean, it's sort of quite casual. It's surreal if you're on the other end of the phone and reminding yourself this is the commander-in-chief of the world's superpower. So I don't want to sort of read too much amateur psychology into it, but just from the content of what he said and his responses to my questions, I don't think he's got much. I mean, he's in this self-created dilemma, and he hasn't got too many good ideas about how to get out of it. That's my real takeaway.
You're US national editor with the Financial Times. What's your sense of the appetite amongst the American public for further intervention, if that is what happens here?
Right now, it's not at the forefront of the American public's minds, believe it or not. I mean, the impact of higher petrol prices, gas prices at the pump, is being felt. There was a lot of disaffection with the state of the economy before this war began, so the war is not helping. But because there haven't been too many American casualties, I think 13 so far, a few hundred injured to be sure, but only 13 dead, it hasn't really registered as a war with the American public at large. Opinion polls show that if this came to a boots-on-the-ground situation, a tiny fraction of the population would support it. So this is it's not a popular war. It would become dramatically more prominent in people's minds and more unpopular, one would imagine, if this involved actual on-the-ground operations by American troops in Iran.
All right. Edward Luce, US national editor with the Financial Times. Thanks indeed for speaking to us on 6-1.
It's my pleasure.